Hi, and welcome to Power the Network. I'm your host, Tim Locker, Vice President of Broadband for CBM. It's great to be back in studio again. Super excited about our guest today, Mr. David Johnson with DuraLine. He's the Business Development Manager for Central U.S. For Micro Technologies. I've known David, 6-7 years now. I had the pleasure to work with him. Most competitive guy that I know. I love him like a brother, and we always have a good time together. So let's get into our conversation with David. Thanks for coming in today. Really appreciate you taking the time to come in and visit with us. We met back in 2017 when you started with DuraLine. We've had an opportunity to work together over the years and really have built a great friendship. And that's one of the things that, that I love about this industry is the people and the relationships. What's your favorite part of your career so far, starting with DuraLine?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that I've enjoyed is every day is different, which is kind of cool. And it's hard to explain that, but the amount of people in this industry, the amount of personalities that you meet, you're dealing with a lot of different things each and every day, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, the industry is very warm and warm welcoming, very easy to get along with, and everybody is curious, right? Yeah. Which is kind of cool, right? Yeah. And when you have curiosity, it opens up doors for good communication, good opportunities to learn about people and what they're going through. And that's probably my favorite part. Yeah, I mean, the relationships that I've grown in the last 7 years have been pretty incredible. And in my personal, I strive to make them long lasting, right? Yeah. I don't want them transactional.
Well,
right?
The industry is such a tight-knit group. Yep. It's a very small industry, when you really look at it. Mm-hmm. And for longevity, obviously you have to have, integrity is one thing, yep. Treat people right. But those relationships, people move from company to company and, it's going to come back full circle. Yep. And some of the customers that we're able to work with, traveling for me, I couldn't just sit in an office job every day. Yep. And, stare at the same four walls. I've always been in some kind of position where I've traveled. Yep. And you get to see stuff that you wouldn't normally see. Yeah.
I mean, that's when my first 3-4 years here, as you know, lived in Pleasant Hill, Missouri, and I was driving 1,000 miles a week. Right. Yeah. So you go eastern Nebraska, it's different type of people. You go to Omaha, it's different type of people. You go to wherever you're at in that radius of 4 states, you're meeting a different type of people, and that's what I like about it is it's different every day, right? Yeah. You get to adapt. I like the term dealing with ambiguity, dealing with change, and I love that, right? Because it keeps me on my toes.
Change is one of the things that we're going to talk about today because that can be hard for some folks.
Yes.
So we'll get into that here in a little bit. But so, I mean, I'm just going to come out with it. You are probably one of the most competitive people that I know. Yeah. and that's great. I mean, you and I, our relationship is like we're brothers. Yep. And I'm probably better at a lot of things than you are, and I know it's hard. But how has that helped you professionally? And because I know it's a value. Yeah. So how does that help you in a professional setting?
Well, I mean, I'd attribute my competitiveness to what I grew up doing, right? Yeah. Multi-sport person, right? I played multi-sports, even in college. And it was something that I had to, in order for me to be successful, I had to get better, right? Every single day, had to get better. Yeah. So, challenging myself each and every day, that competitiveness, wanting to be the best, right? Yeah. It can be, termed as arrogant or sometimes off-putting. But I try my best to not go that far, right? Yeah. But it's something that has driven me in my life. And we hear I have kind of like an idol, someone that I look up to, a mentor recently, with all the podcasts and whatnot. His name's Inky Johnson. He had a tragic event that happened to him in his college career. And one of the things that he always says is it's not about the results. It's about the process, right? It's not about what happens at the end. It's not about what you're striving for, but it's the process in which you go through. And when difficult times happen, what is that defining your character, right? Do you keep pushing on? Do you keep moving forward and keep learning? Or do you just crumble? Or do you just blame, right?
Yeah.
And so it's all about the process. And so for me, just in general, my competitiveness is mostly how can I make my process make me grow, make me learn and whatnot. So.
No, that's a great point, a good perspective. And one of the things we've built a friendship over the years, and I remember, several years back, I think we were talking about something with my, maybe one of my son's sports or something, but you talked about being coachable.
Yeah.
And at the time we were talking about it, I could tell you, like, you understood that and you meant it. And it might have even been too, I think you've said it twice, because you talked about it in a golf. I know that's a good hobby of yours. You like to golf.
Yeah, I love it.
But to actually understand that and think about it, like, I've watched you learn different things over the years because you have that mindset. And I don't think that's something people really think about. But in a work environment too, that's obviously a good quality. So being coachable, you made that very evident to me. In your mind, then, what does that mean to you, and how do you tie that into work?
Yeah. So it all depends on the person, right? Where are they at in their life? What are they trying to accomplish? Because when you're a coachable person, that allows you to know that you're going to get told something that you need to improve on. And does that offend you?
You've got to take some humility a little bit.
Yeah. So you got to be able to accept that, right? And a lot of times in my career, it was tough, but I've always wanted to be better, right? Yeah. So it's the want and the desire to overcome some of your weaknesses that you may not see. Yeah. And coachable is your coach sees you, or your mentor or the people seeing you see those weaknesses, and they're not trying to point them out to make you feel terrible. Yeah, they're pointing them out to let you know that this is something you can help you become better, right? And so that's where I think it's all about the person, right? If they're willing to do that,
keep the open mind.
They have the open mind. They have the mindset of wanting to do it, right?
And accept.
Yeah. And it doesn't happen always that way, right?
No,
I mean, there's moments where it's definitely hard to. It's a tough pill to swallow at times, but it's about the process. Yeah. It's not about, the result.
No, that's a great perspective. So. I appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit about DuraLine. The big push right now is in microtechnologies. Yeah. So your title would be Business Development Manager for Microtechnologies?
Yeah. Business Development Manager, Central U.S. Okay. And it's really just to help the entire industry understand really where this stuff fits into their play or what they're trying to accomplish.
And without getting too far into the weeds, explain a little bit when we say microtechnologies, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so a lot of people might confuse, because we have a term MicroDuct, they might be like, oh, you're just talking about your product, your pathway, whatnot, but it's not just that, right? It incorporates every aspect that touches this type of product, right? So when we're talking about microtechnology, it's the pathway. It's the cable that you're placing inside the pathway. It could be your connectivity, your splitters, your handholds, and then also what you do to install that product, right? Placing equipment, jetting equipment. It's the whole process. So when you're talking microtechnology, it's not just DuraLines, MicroDuct and FuturePath. It's the package, right? The customer has to understand what that means because there's small things that you have to adapt to and change to. In order to be successful with it.
There's that word again, change.
Yep.
Let's get into it. So, we're dealing with, different companies, their projects, contractors, et cetera. Contractors especially seem to either they grasp it and run with it, or they don't understand it and don't run with it.
Yeah.
I kind of call it fighting the medicine.
For sure.
I think we both agree that, microtechnology makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
How do we how do we educate the contractors? How do we get them off center to actually kind of open their minds and be coachable, if you will,
sure.
and try this type of technology?
I think there's a twofold situation. You kind of have to understand your situation, right? And we can go back to what we talked about earlier, where we were talking about how this industry is so tight knit.
Yeah.
Right. So because it's so tight knit, some of these people or contractors or end users who haven't used it, they've heard about it.
Yeah.
And maybe that particular situation they heard about didn't go too well. And a lot of that has to do with not being educated, or they didn't get the training necessary to be successful. And so that word of mouth goes out in a wrong way. Right?
Yeah, can go either way.
So we have to understand, what we're dealing with. We have to understand that although the information they're saying on the negative part of this might be very true, we also need to let them know that there's a way to be trained or educated to make this successful. And once you follow those steps, the majority of the time you're going to have a lot of great experience with this product.
Yeah, the reality is it's not as scary as it may seem to be at first.
Yeah, a term I absolutely hate is it's just pipe, right?
Yeah. It's just
in this situation, it is. I mean, it's a pathway. There's not much different. It's just on a smaller level.
Yeah.
So
and you mentioned training, and I know that's one thing that DuraLine is very big on.
Yes.
Whether it be corporately direct or whether it be through your rep firms.
Yep.
There's always somebody available, to go out in the field, make sure your job is, get kicked off on the right foot so you're successful.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one thing that we want everybody to know is that, we are here to train you. We do not want you doing this by yourself. We're not just throwing you something and saying good luck.
Yeah.
But it's to me, it's shocking how much people don't take up that offer though too.
Yeah.
Because, whether it could be they're competitive. Maybe they're like, I know how to do this stuff. I'm good.
Ego.
I don't need help, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's that or whatever it is, but the important thing is when you get support, when you get asked or offered support, I mean, take it. Take it because we want to give it to you, and you're going to find yourself not wasting time down the road when you do that.
Yeah.
So,
what are some of the biggest misconceptions about MicroDuct?
Well, the biggest thing isn't necessarily the pathway. I would think it's the fiber optic cable, right?
Yeah,
for
sure.
It's the cable, right? It's I'm installing a cable that is double jacket or single armored or just has robust, strength, and you're going to a product that is a lot smaller, right? But the important thing for us to remember is the glass is the same glass. It's outdoor rated, right?
Yep.
And, as long as you are following the recommended steps in the training of how you place your handhole, how you protect that open environment when you actually are dealing with or have fear of that fiber cable getting ruined. If you're doing the steps that are necessary, those kind of get, they forget about them pretty quickly, but it's a huge pinpoint, right?
Yeah.
For people at the beginning of their
process.
process.
And, different industries, whether it's utility space or the communication space and, different geographical concerns, you do see that. The fiber cable can be a little bit intimidating, but I think, you and I have both been around the fiber jetting process a lot.
Yep.
And I think, if anybody gets the opportunity to see that live and in person and actually, it's real impressive how much cable you can get in the ground in such a hurry.
I mean, I love to say it, but that's where the magic happens, right? That's where it's fun. And every time I'm talking about it, this is where I tell customers, this is the cherry on the top, right? This is really what wraps it all together.
Yeah.
And this is why you're doing it. We can talk great about the pathway. We can talk great about the fiber cable, kind of get them convinced, but it's the jaw-dropping moment when you see that product placed and how fast it goes into the MicroDucts and whatnot. So
well, and on top of that, so the first install is obviously, the jaw-dropping moment, like you said. But talk about the benefits of having multiple pathways.
Yeah. So that's the thing that people don't necessarily see, and they don't necessarily think about.
It's always kind of been a cost deal.
It's always been. How much does one pipe cost versus a 7-way or a 4-way?
Yeah.
But that's not the reality, right? When you get into, depending on where you're at in the build, first mile, middle mile, or last mile, a lot of us don't realize that in the last mile, you're not just putting in 1.25 inches. You're putting in multiple 1.25 inches.
Yeah.
Because you've got your distribution fiber cable, then you've got your drops, and you're already installing that, right? So your cost to install multiple bundles of standard conduit is significantly higher than we initially think about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, installing something that has 7 or 4 pathways in less than 1.25 inches size, the installation of that product going in the ground is a lot cheaper than doing, multiple 1.25 inches or a 2-inch product and whatnot.
And the ability to come back later and add to it.
And add to it, yep.
That's one of the things that sticks out to me, not even looking too far back, 10, 15 years ago, some of the networks that have been built really aren't designed to last.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of money coming from the BEAD funding. What do we need to do different on today's network to make sure that they last? An old copper network, they built for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
I don't feel like we're doing that today. It's all about cost. Long term, that's going to cost us more.
Yeah, and I mean it's all dependent on your I guess you can say your network, right? Who's your network? Who's designing this stuff?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of designers out there, networkers that do a phenomenal job, but they sometimes pigeon-toe themselves into something that they know works, right? And when you know something works, you kind of just run with it, and
it's hard to change.
It's hard to change, right? And it's all about, finding ways in certain situations where this might make sense a little bit more for this particular customer and what they're doing. Maybe that neighborhood has the potential to grow, right? So we want to add something that allows that. A lot of people add fiber counts to those situations, where what's great about this solution is you don't have to do that. You can have a pathway, spare pathway, redundancy for you to add and only use what you need now. Right? Use what you need now, and then you have pathways to grow down the road. And what's great, it's a reusable pathway. So once you've added onto that capacity, you can remove and terminate that old network and then continue on to use that pathway, reusable pathway, right?
Because it's always a guessing game up there.
Yep.
Years ago, you'd put a 6 fiber cable in the ground, and you'll never need more than that. How many times have you heard that?
Oh, wow.
That eliminates the guessing game for sure.
Yep.
Really quick, let me tell you a little bit about CBM. We're a manufacturer's rep firm right here in the Midwest. What that means is we are a contracted sales organization that works for multiple different manufacturers. So we can be a resource for you on many different facets. We were established in 1960 and now are an ESOP company, so we are employee owned. And what that means is we have a different mindset here. The tagline around the office is act like an owner. So our employees, they think differently, think as owners, and we operate that way. And we are inspired by that leadership. If we can be a resource for you, please reach out to us at cbmrep.com. So let's take a second and just talk definitions. Yeah. So, we've talked a lot about MicroDuct, future path, and some of our viewers may not know what we're talking about. So real basic definitions, what is a MicroDuct?
Yeah, so let's talk about what we know, right? Yeah. So what we know is a standard conduit, right? So we've got 1.25 inch conduit, you got 2-inch conduit, 3-inch, 4-inch, stuff that the entire U.S. is very familiar with, right? Rollable pipe, product that we've become notorious for making for our customers. Continuous rolled pipe versus the PVC pipe, right? Yep. Stick pipe.
Sure.
So you have that product right there, 1.25 inch. You get to a point to where with MicroDucts, it's so small we can't talk in inches anymore. That's the reason why this product is somewhat new in America, because this is the only thing that's used in Europe, right?
Yeah.
How small of locations they've got, what they use MicroDucts, and they use those in terms of millimeters. So you get to a point to where it's so small where you got to talk in millimeters. And so a MicroDuct, ranges from 27 millimeter and below MicroDuct. And that's why we call them, MicroDucts, because how small they are, and relative to standard conduit. So MicroDuct, similar to what you're kind of seeing here, this is a bundle of MicroDucts, what we call Future Path, and that product right there is kind of jumbling right now, but
no. So this is a 7-way 1814.
Yes,
right.
7-way 1814.
So inside this pipe, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but each one of these then is a MicroDuct. Yep. So when it's bundled, this oversheath is put on, and then that's considered a Future Path.
Yep.
So that's how that's marketed. But so each one of these 18 millimeter outside diameter, 14 millimeter inside diameter.
Yep.
That one 1814 can take as many as, so this is a 432 micro cable, so 432 fibers that can be jetted into, one of those individual pipes. Now that sometimes can get overwhelming and a little scary, and that's one of the things we've touched on, but that's the value of this pipe, the density that you can actually get that many fibers into it and then add more, as you move on. So
what's great about our MicroDucts, right? So something that separates us from the entire industry is what we put inside of our MicroDucts, right? So they all are ribbed in, so they have less surface area for that fiber cable to touch, which eliminates friction. So not only does the ribbed in help the product and the installation process, but we have a permanently extruded lining inside of that called Silicor ULF. So that Silicor ULF reduces the friction quite a bit, right? It makes it so you can jet, without that product, you're jetting a few thousand feet, and we're at least doubling that distance because of that Silicor ULF.
Yep.
So that's one thing that all of our MicroDucts provide. We also have the opportunity to put that inside of our standard conduit as well, but it doesn't come there, just standard. It's not their standard, but all of our MicroDucts have that Silicor ULF.
Yeah, and so this product here, just briefly, so this is a jumbo Future Path. So you've got actual 1.25" ducts that does have the Silicor ULF in it, combined with the MicroDuct. So.
And we call this one, it's our hybrid Future Path.
Yep. Okay.
Right. And so hybrid Future Path is a combination of standard duct with MicroDuct. And we also have a jumbo Future Path, which you mentioned there, but that's just standard conduit and oversheath. So this is what kind of replacement for a 4-inch duct? Yes.
Metro type application.
Yep.
Where you may be pulling standard cable, you may be using MicroDuct.
It's a great replacement for any environment where you're using PVC pipe as well, right? 4-inch PVC pipe, stick pipe, a large diameter pipe. If it's in the HDP world, 4-inch pipe. It completely replaces this. It's a one-step install. And what I mean by that is, with a 4-inch pipe, you're installing it, and then you're putting something inside of it. Whatever that is, it's multiple inner ducts inside of that, or Maxell product, fabric lining, right? It's a one-step install, and you have 6 pathways ready to use instantly once you've installed it.
So one of the things I think is important, moving forward, we talked a little bit about, how do we make the networks last? Scalability. Mm-hmm. I know that's one of the things I think we have to keep in mind as we build these, and obviously this product is perfectly suited for that.
Yeah.
So, how do we change that mindset to think about long term? Because we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen in 10 years or 20 years, but we need to get 30 years out of a network. So, talk a little bit about how this will help.
Yeah, and I mean, the industry's starting to kind of wrap their heads around, how do I build for the future already?
Yeah.
That's why they're installing 2 or 3 1.25". That's why they're installing multiple 2-inch products, right? They're building their own Future Path bundle with standard duct, right? And so the industry's kind of adapted to that already. The biggest thing that we have to overcome really is just understanding the big picture. And that's something that I like to discuss about with a lot of our customers and engineering firms, is understanding the big picture of what this looks like, right? when you get your numbers and all your product and the cost of a pathway, our pathway is less than 3% of the overall build.
Yeah.
And people are always penny crunching and really trying to get the cheapest solution with your pathway, but your pathway is your infrastructure.
Yeah.
Your pathway is what you use to install your cable. So it's less than 3% of the overall cost. We probably should have, value
and probably smaller than that, really.
I'm kind of throwing it up there as, if the percentage goes, but, if we short circuit that, we're short circuiting what we can do in the future. Right. Yeah. And so, thinking about it more often, realizing what the overall cost of that is, and the changes you can have, really can set you up for success.
Yeah. And there are cheaper solutions.
Oh yeah.
I mean, nothing to hide there. It's a very competitive market.
Yep.
I know there's a lot of different companies that are, coming after this technology and trying to really compete with it. But what sets DuraLine apart?
Well, I mean, the one thing that I talk about all the time with us is the quality of our product, right? So DuraLine's been around since 1971, right? So a little over 50 years. We started in Middlesboro, Kentucky, and we started in the gas and water industry, right? Something that we're not really that specialized in anymore, right? Yeah. So we've evolved, right? We've evolved to being a huge player, the number one HDPE manufacturer in the U.S., right? So we have 13 plants and counting in North America footprint. We've become a $1 billion company in the United States. And you don't get that big with not changing, right? Adapting, continuing in your process, right? Yeah. And that's what we are very good at, right? So we are constantly changing, trying to improve ourselves and, what we can provide to our customers to where, we're not just providing pipe anymore, right? We're providing, opportunities for engineering support. We're providing opportunities for training, on-site training and support. We even have our own Dura-Line Academy. A lot of the things that we overlook as companies and even these small telcos, right, is how do we train our team? Yeah. How do we value them enough to give them the training that they need? And so we've done a lot of training within our own company, and it's with the Dura-Line Academy, and we're offering that to all of our customers. Yeah, right. We're offering it to every single one of them to use our data, our classes, our courses on microtechnology, even safety, installation tips, designing,
how to put it together,
right? How to do all of that, and so that's what separates us from most of our competitors, right? We're not just pushing out pipe. We're pushing out a solution and constant, continuous support to our end users, which is always there.
Yeah, and we feel that as one of your reps. We've our guys have all been through the academy. The trainings are great. If anybody is interested in that, where do they find that?
Yeah, so it's academy.duraline.com. And that's where you can
just go in and register and sign up.
It's all free. You make your own account. The courses right there are available to anybody who signs up and makes an account. And there are some on there that do say they cost, but we have ways to give you discount codes.
We'll figure that out for you
and help you out so you don't have to pay for those.
No, that's great. And obviously as a manufacturer's rep, it's important to us, working for, good companies like DuraLine and the relationships that you guys have with reps. Talk a little bit about how you work with your reps and, how we partner together in the field. So I think a lot of times maybe people don't understand what a rep does.
Oh, yeah.
And, shame on us maybe, but talk about that relationship a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can't thank our rep firms and CBM enough with what you guys do for us. You guys are evolving as well. You're trying to change how you go to market with your customers and support your customers, and those are the kinds of rep firms that we want to go to business with, right? And for us, a rep firm is an extension arm for our sales team. Right? Yeah. They are an extension. We do not buy or purchase, or you guys don't take product or sell to customers directly. That's we see the customers physically, man to man, person to person, woman to woman. We see them to directly, yes, but we do not sell through a rep or whatnot, right? So it's important
through distribution.
It's through distribution or avenues of who we work with. But our rep firms are just there to expand our reach, right? And get to those people that we may oversee, right? And they also help us with large accounts that we may need a little additional support outside of our product that we sell. Fiber optic cable, right? Handholds or jetting equipment, right? So we use you guys.
Well, that's one of the neat things that one of the neat parts about being a rep and a benefit to a company like DuraLine is having a portfolio of all the products. So when we talk about micro solutions, micro technology, obviously we can help you with the duct. But we can help you with the fiber cable. We can help you with the vaults. We can help you with the splice closures. We can help you with this, the splicing machines. From one end to the other, it actually adds value to the manufacturer as well, because maybe we don't get in there with the DuraLine product, but we talk to them about another line. And then it's an opportunity, to bring more people into the picture. So
it's all about timing in this industry.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have we visited a customer and we're like, oh man, if you would have been here a few months ago when I started buying my network, and I wish I could have been able to know about this stuff before. But yeah, you're right. I mean, when you can go in there and you've timed it perfectly and you get splicers, right? They're at that point they need splicers. Right, you start building that relationship with that customer. You start showing how good you are in the support world, which is why we have a relationship with you. And then they start saying, "Oh, well, we're starting to do this build over here. Maybe we can start talking about what we missed out on the last time." Right,
build a little credibility. That goes back to those relationships. That is once again one of the biggest things that I love about the job is just the people and the customers and the manufacturers and everybody that we get to work with. So.
For the majority part of this industry, they're all great people, right? And I mean, there's a reason why they stick around so long, is because it's hard to leave.
So let's talk a little bit more about training. I know you guys just recently had kind of an internal fiber to the home type of training. You brought in some other manufacturers, to teach your internal folks. Talk a little bit about what happened there.
So we had an internal tech summit where we our subject matter was fiber to the home, right? With the BEAD funding coming out, with knowing what opportunities we have here in the near future. We wanted to make sure our entire team understood, what it is that micro technology world really consists of. Right. So we had multiple manufacturers and we call them partner relationships, manufacturer partners, where they'll come in and they would talk about their particular product that they are working with in the fiber to the home network. Right. And
that other piece of the micro technology.
The other piece of micro technology, really understanding what each part of that build looks. And, one of the terms we used is follow the light. Right? From the CO all the way through the huts, through the cabinets, all the way to the home. Right? So we followed the light, what that consists of, where the pathway fits inside of that footprint. And then also where all the other, vendor partners, are taking place in this environment. Right?
Well, I think that's huge, because obviously, if you guys have to understand what, the other manufacturers are doing, they need to understand what you're doing. And how do we collaborate all that together to make this network more viable? I think that's great. I know, you had Brennan O'Boyle with POP there, and he got to talk about, why a preformed dome closure is better, why to use that. And I know, just from personally talking to him, I know that meeting was very important to, not only to him, but to Preform and some of the other partners that we work with. I think that's awesome what you guys did there. And I think that goes to show the difference, of what DuraLine is willing to do, for the long term versus, some of the others. So.
Yeah, when you have relationships with multiple people and multiple partnerships, it makes your job that much easier. Yeah. It just makes it easier to go out and, that's what a customer wants to know. They want to know what are all their options, right? What options do they have?
Yeah.
Where, there's some solutions out there where it's mine or all. It's all or mine.
Yeah.
All
or nothing.
All or nothing. And if you don't do that, then it's not going to work out, right? So, our solution allows you to, piece and match what makes sense for that customer, and allows them to adapt and make their own network and piece it together, which is great.
So talk a little bit. I know we've talked a lot about in the communication space today, but what other markets are you responsible for? Where are we seeing this type of solution?
Yeah, I mean, what's the easy short answer to this is this product fits in every single vertical market you can think of.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the easy answer. Right now, I mean, we got this started in the independent telephone companies, the telco world.
Yep.
That's where it's really kind of started out, initiated. But as things progress, as the knowledge gets out there, you have, government entities, DOTs, you have city ofs, municipalities. They really like this product because it allows them to install a product and not have multiple internet service providers come in 1 year, and then they're digging up and making permits the next year with another ISP, right? So, it's really huge for those government entities, city ofs, municipalities. That's a really big vertical market right now with this particular product and how it's growing. And then we also have the power utility world, right? Electrical co-ops, power utilities are trying to find another source of income besides just a utility bill with their customers, right? So, they are trying to find out ways to bring internet services to their loyal customers that they've had for a long time, and they're starting to learn more about what the fiber network looks like, installing fiber optic cable. But those guys are kind of the big ones right now that are really up and growing.
And we're seeing a big shift in the broadband projects. We're seeing a lot of RECs and utility companies doing these builds.
Yep.
And some of them are very well versed in fiber, and some of them are very not. It's new to them.
Oh yeah.
So the fact that you guys do such a good job on training and educating the customer, I think that's huge.
No, yeah, and I mean, like we've said, we've done the work on building a training platform, right? We've done that work. We've put in the time, and we want to share it with our customers. We have a few situations where our Dura-Line Academy can be morphed into a specific customer's own training academy for themselves. Right. So when they have new employees come in, we'll tailor fit it to whatever that particular customer would like us to do. Right. We've done it with a few customers, and they've been very grateful for this opportunity because they haven't had to spend the time to build their training facility or their training website or whatever that may be. They're able to, now incorporate, the hard work that we've done, we would be able to incorporate it into their own training, which is awesome.
Yeah. And where do we find that again?
Academy.DuraLine.com.
That's awesome. David, once again, I love you like a brother.
Yep.
Thanks for coming in and talking to us today and shedding some information on DuraLine and future path. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Well, there you have it. I always love talking with David. Like I said, he's truly like a brother to me. You can tell, how incredibly passionate he is about what he does, and I share those same passions with him. Always love talking to David. If you'd like to find out more information about some of the stuff we talked about today, you can go to DuraLinecom or always reach out to us here at CBM, cbmrep.com. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next one.